Hey there, welcome to lesson 8.4. We're going over trigonometry functions, and this is just really the starting point for trig, and there is a lot of different things that trig can offer, but we're just going to start out with the basics. So trigonometry is the study of the properties of a triangle and trigonometric functions and their application. And then the trigonometric ratio is what we're going to talk about a lot today. It's just the ratio of the lengths of the sides of a right triangle, and we're going to use these trig functions for our right triangle. And something that you may have seen before is the Sohcahtoa method that a lot of people use and talk about to help you through these trig functions. And Sohcahtoa really stands for these values down here. So is sine. And then just a little preview, that's going to be your opposite over your hypotenuse, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Notice the two letters. The next is Coa. That stands for cosine, so that would be your adjacent over your hypotenuse. And then TOA stands for tangent, and you are going to use your opposite over your adjacent. Notice you don't use your hypotenuse in that. So what do all these things stand for? And I would suggest whenever you're doing these things, write that on the top of your paper. That can only help you through these problems. It will not hurt. So the first thing you need to make sure you remember is, depending on what angle they give you right behind the trig function is the angle that you're going to look at. So if I'm being asked to look at the sine of A, I'm going to first identify angle A, and then I'm going to say, okay, what's my opposite side? And of course, opposite means across from, so CB would be my opposite. Over my hypotenuse, that is going to be the same for everything. It is always across from your right angle. So I'm going to put opposite CB over my hypotenuse AB. All right, moving on to the next one, we are looking at cosine. Remember, cosine is adjacent over your hypotenuse, but I first have to identify what angle are they asking me to identify, because this ratio is going to be different if that would say cosine of A. Excuse me. So cosine of B, remember, is my adjacent. Now my adjacent is the leg that touches that angle. So this would be my adjacent side. Over, and then of course my hypotenuse is always going to stay the same for any of the angles I'm talking about. So my adjacent is my cosine of B is my adjacent over my hypotenuse. And then lastly up here we are talking about my tangent, and tangent is opposite over adjacent, but again I have to identify what angle are they asking me to use for my tangent. So I'm going to look at angle C. And then according to angle C, my opposite side would be AB, because it is across from my angle. And then adjacent is going to be the leg that hits that angle. So that would be CB. And just to look at it, if I would ask you to find the tangent of A, notice tangent of A, my opposite side is over here now. So that would be BC, and then my adjacent side would be here. So notice how much different that ratio is going to be depending on what angle you are being asked to use. All right, and we will get into the inverse of sine, cosine, and tangent, but when you do the inverse, and we'll talk about this in class, but when you do the inverse sine, you're actually finding an angle measure. So you are finding what is angle B in that instance. So you're going to push the second button, which is the top left, and then you'd pick your sine. But notice that the ratio here stays the same as the ratio here. So that does not change, but what you are trying to find is actually going to change. So if you want to stop this video and write that down, that would be great, and we'll keep going. All right, just as a reminder, so name the sides we have according to the given angle. So these ratios will look different depending on what angle the problem asks you to. So remember, your opposite side is always across from that given angle. It's that opposite side will not touch your angle you're looking at. Your adjacent side is going to touch the given angle, so it will be a side that hits at that turning point, and then your hypotenuse will be the same no matter what angle you're looking at. It's always going to be across from that right angle. All right, flipping over, I'm going to give you a second just to write down that Sohcahtoa, because I do think it's important for you to write that at the top of your paper every time. And then I always go ahead and write down what that Sohcahtoa means. So the S in so means sine, and then opposite and hypotenuse. So that's kind of what it's talking about. So in this first example, we need to find the sine, cosine, and tangent ratios. And when it asks for the ratios, I'm literally just going to create a fraction and simplify. I am not going to push any of my trig buttons. We'll get to that later. So my first thing is to express angle L as sine, as a fraction, and as a decimal. So notice I'm looking at angle L. So I'm looking at angle L. I'm looking at my sine is opposite over my hypotenuse. So I like to write down my opposite side would be 12. So the sine of L equals my opposite side 12 over my hypotenuse, which again is always the same. It's across from that right angle. And then I'm going to simplify that. Can I simplify that fraction? No, but I also need to write that as a decimal. So to get my decimal, I'm going to say 12 divided by 37. That's literally all you put in your calculator. And to the nearest hundredth, I'm going to go to 4 decimal places. Just a little practice on rounding. All right. So again, we're going to find excuse me, the cosine of L. So cosine, if you look up above, is adjacent over your hypotenuse. So I first need to identify angle L. L is right here. So my adjacent side is the leg that touches it. So that would be 35 over my hypotenuse, which is 37 again. Remember, it's across from that right angle. So I'm going to simplify that fraction. If I can't simplify, I'm going to go ahead and make it a decimal. And again, you're not pushing the cosine button. You're just saying 35 divided by 37 because I just need the ratio. All right, let's try the tangent of L. Remember, tangent is, if you want to look up at the top of your paper, opposite over your adjacent. So still finding L because I'm going to have a different ratio if I was asked to look at angle N. So tangent of L equals my opposite side is across from, so 12 over the side that touches my angle 35. Make sure you reduce that fraction if you can. If you can't, then you're going to put it as a decimal just by putting 12 divided by 35 in your calculator. All right, if you want to stop this video and try 1D, 1E, and 1F on your own, and then you can check your answers. All right, and here are your answers to 1D, 1E, and 1F. So hope this helps. We are going to start our using those trig buttons here on the next section, but that's all for this video, and we'll see you soon.